Major funding for Wild Pennsylvania is made possible by the Pennsylvania Game Commission, protecting and conserving Pennsylvania's wildlife resources for over a century. Additional funding is provided by the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy, saving the places we care about, and through the financial support of members of this Pennsylvania public television station.
These are actually the most prolific eagles in the state. They've raised 17 young in 8 years, and this year they have 2 more young.
This eagle nest here at Haldeman Island was right next to the hack site where birds were brought in from Saskatchewan, and over a period of 8 years, 82 birds were imported. And that has been the backbone of the population nesting across Pennsylvania at this time.
There she goes.
By mid-century, the bald eagle had all but been eliminated as a breeding species in the state of Pennsylvania. The few eagle nests that were left in the state were producing 0, 1, or 2 youngsters at most every year. And that persisted from about the mid-60s through the early 1980s, when we got serious about recovering the bald eagle in Pennsylvania. And we could get serious because the environment was cleaning up. The streams were cleaning up, the fish were better food, DDT had been eliminated, so the stage had been set for the recovery of the bald eagle in the state of Pennsylvania. We looked for bald eagles where the environment hadn't been contaminated. We went to Saskatchewan, Canada, where there was very little agriculture in the northern part of the country, in fact none. And there was a large bald eagle population in the very many lakes found in that region. We formed an agreement with the Canadian government to take 1 eagle out of a nest with 2 or 3 eagles. We never removed all the eagles from any one nest, but we'd remove 1 eaglet from a nest of 2 or 3 eaglets until we got about 12 eaglets. In fact, we paid Canadian researchers to go out and examine these nests before we ever arrived. Going up to Canada and getting eagles was new for everybody in the Game Commission. It was a challenge. Everything from the kind of cages that you had to put the animals in, to how many cages and eaglets and people you could crowd in an airplane. We had to take climbers with us and people that would handle and feed the eaglets that we got. It was quite an expedition.
Some years ago, the Canadian government built a large hydroelectric facility on the Churchill River, and the enormous lake it created attracted large numbers of eagles. The population increased so dramatically that it was scarcely affected by the provincial government's decision to permit the Game Commission to capture 12 to 15 young eagles annually and take them to Pennsylvania. On the shores of this man-made lake, crews set up a cache site. Several officers will remain here to examine, band, and feed the incoming eaglets. It's also their responsibility to catch fresh fish to nourish the perpetually hungry youngsters, an assignment that stands in sharp contrast to the difficult and dangerous job of actually capturing them. The 2 bush planes carry separate capture teams, each with its own leader.
The first responsibility of the capture team is going to be to, from aircraft, to actually locate the nest. Now, the first thing we're going to do, and we have a good idea where these nests will be ahead of time, is because Pennsylvania has contracted with a Canadian wildlife biologist prior to our arrival to actually go out and locate nests and plot them on aerial photographs. So what we're able to do is simply take those photographs, and with those on our laps, we're able to pretty well instruct our pilot the day of the capture. We'll actually be able to go up today and point out to the pilot exactly where those nests should be located. We'll be able to point out land features and so forth. So as he makes a low approach to an area that we indicate to him there should be a nest, he'll be able to cut his airspeed to get that plane going as slow as possible and get it right down over the treetops. That'll give us a chance to not only locate the nest, but get a good look into the nest. Oftentimes it may take 3, 4, even 5 passes from different angles over a nest till we finally find the right angle to give us a good enough look into the nest to determine whether or not there's 2 or possibly 3 young in it. If there's 1, or if the nest is empty, obviously we're going to fly on to the next. If we do determine, though, that there are 2 or 3 eaglets in that nest, then we're going to stop and make a climb. At this point, the pilot's going to have to gain some altitude again, and his objective there is simply going to be to get a good look at the water so he knows where he can safely land, more importantly, where he can safely take off again. At that point, he'll land the craft, taxi into the shoreline as near the nest as he can get, and from that point, it's up to us to make the climb. Okay, the climbing team, once we are at the tree, we're going to get up that tree and get that young bird out as quickly as we can. I'm going to have all the gear on as soon as I'm out of the airplane. My climbing partner or my ground man, his job is going to be to keep me safe, to see to it I come down out of the tree still in shape to climb the next one. So the gear we use is much the same as a rock climber would use. A lot of ropes and a lot of safety gear that we can attach those ropes to prevent a fall. At the tree, I might be looking up 40 feet to possibly 80 or 90 feet to the nest in some of these trees in Saskatchewan. What we'll find in the size of the tree might be a small one that's 4 foot in depth to some of the larger ones that till you get to that tree, you're still, if you're at the bottom of the nest, you might be 8 feet from the top. And it oftentimes becomes a matter of climbing underneath the nest and up along the side, almost as if you're going on the underside of a rock cliff. So the same climbing techniques apply. Once I get up through that tree and negotiate all of the limbs and the other things that might be in the way and get to the nest and negotiate my way around that nest and up to the top, it's a breathtaking view to look over the top of a nest and see those 2 or 3 eaglets and get a look at the world through the eyes of an eagle, through what they see through the first few weeks of their lives. Once I get myself to the point that I do have at least my shoulders as high as the top of the nest, it's quite easy to reach out and without harming them in any way, grab hold of the legs of the young bird, bring it into me and put it into a burlap bag where it's just going to take a short trip down to the bottom of that tree. I'll lower it with a rope, and just as soon as it's on the ground, all attention is off me. I'll just stay there at the nest and not work around with the ropes while the ground man will get that young bird out of that burlap bag and safely back to the plane. Once that's done and the bird's taken care of, then it's time for me to come down out of the tree as safe as we can. We load all the gear back on and get back into the air looking for the next site.
In the final year of the recovery project, Game Commission climbers will scale 14 nest trees and collect 15 eagles in a single day. Within minutes of capture, each bird is placed in a specially designed transportation crate and airlifted back to the cache site for processing. Jack Byerly outlines the procedures at Lakeside.
After the capture team returns the birds to us here at the cache site, we'll begin by banding the birds, putting a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service leg band on one leg. We'll put a yellow band on the other leg, identifying it as a Game Commission band with alphanumeric, such that we can identify which bird is which nest it came from. And subsequently, after release, if a bird is captured or identified, we can identify it as to which of the nest locations or hacking site release points it came from. We also physically inspect the birds to make sure they're free of parasites and any sort of maggots. We can clean them up and ensure their health and safety while we have them in our possession. Once the birds have settled down a bit, we'll begin feeding the birds with small pieces of fish, much as their parents would do in the nest. We have to feed them by hand initially until such time as we get them back to Pennsylvania, where they will be fed without the association with humans.
And then comes the long trip home. Only those aboard the aircraft can fully appreciate what it means to have baby eagles as travel companions.
We'd come back to Pennsylvania with about 12 eagles every trip, and we'd raise them in this state through a process called hacking.
During their 6 to 7 weeks in hacking cages, the eaglets will come to accept this new area as home. To ease the transition from Canada to Pennsylvania, attendants have built nests of tree branches, twigs, and grass that are similar to the nests from which the birds were removed only 2 days earlier. The attendants, specially trained high school and college students, avoid direct contact with the eagles in order to prevent imprinting on humans. They can see the birds through special glass, but the birds can't see them.
3, 4, 5 times a day, they were fed a ration of fish. And later on, sometimes we'd take some road-killed deer for some variety in the diet and feed them road-killed deer as they grew older. But there were hack site attendants that were forever at that hack site while the eaglets were there until the day those young birds were ready to flesh. Then one side of the cage would be removed and they'd be allowed to just hop out on sticks that were in the outside and just perch and exercise their wings, which is what they did.
At mid-morning, having gained enough courage, a bird finally circles the tower. As the day wears on, the eagles become more daring and wander farther from the tower, finding on their return that flying is considerably easier than landing. But in a short time, proficiency improves and the juveniles soar through the sky like veterans.
In biological terms, the eagle hacking process was a tremendous success. Prior to 1985, we were only raising 1 or 2 young eaglets in the state per year. But after we began releasing these hacked birds, and when they started returning to Pennsylvania's environment, instead of 1 or 2, 3 nests in the state, as of this year, we're up to 30 pairs on nest sites in the state of Pennsylvania. Our hacking program stopped at the end of the 1980s, and everything in the 90s has been natural reproduction. And even in a bad year, we'll raise 20 young eagles anymore. We're looking forward in the future to having 40, 50 young eaglets fledge every year from nests in Pennsylvania. That's unheard of. We never did that well at any time this century that we know of.
The peregrine falcon completely disappeared from the eastern United States in the 1970s because of DDT and other contaminant problems. After DDT wiped them out and the recovery efforts began to restore peregrines into Pennsylvania, they started using very different settings. Peregrines moved into urban areas and began nesting on buildings. So peregrines have continued nesting there and also on large bridges spanning particularly the Delaware River in the Philadelphia area.
Roll something while you can. Behind me?
By taking eggs out of wild nests, we're actually able to increase the reproductive success of peregrines in the wild. The birds will replace the eggs that we take out of the wild, and the eggs that we take into captivity are then reared and released at hack sites.
shortly after they hatch, within no more than 10 hours, they'll take their first meal, which will be a couple tidbits of breast meat off quail, soaked in some warm water. And it takes about 5 days of every 4 hours feeding them to get them to a size and strength to move them to the falcons who will raise them from that point forward.
Peregrine falcons were reintroduced into Pennsylvania in a process known as hacking, and hacking is an old falconry term where birds are brought in at about 35 days of age and placed in an artificial nest site. It's not a natural situation. There are not adult peregrines present, but these birds are cared for by people and then allowed to go free. And that's the primary method by which peregrines were brought back into Pennsylvania. Peregrine falcon has always been a rare bird in Pennsylvania, and because of that it will probably receive some special conservation status like a threatened species. But the recovery has been dramatic, and it's really exciting to see peregrines move back in to urban areas, and we hope in the future to see them move back into natural sites as well.
The barn owl is very prolific. In our barn, we are expecting that we will see 3 nesting cycles per year, averaging at least 5 eggs per clutch. We examine them 3 times a week for health until they get to be approximately 2 to 3 weeks old, and then we scale it back to twice a week, and ultimately within about 3 to 4 weeks you're only going in once a week to disturb them.
So once a week we go in, make sure all the birds are well fed, have a nice fat belly, and just make sure there's no problems with the birds. It's upsetting to the parents, especially Cody, the adult male right now. He's very aggressive and protective of the young. That's why we have the hard hats, the goggles, and the gloves.
In order for us to feel we could go forward with the barn owl program, we went to the people that know what they're doing. We don't claim to, but what we're able to do is bring a tremendous amount of labor to bear on an issue. We can handle the birds and take care of getting the people scheduled and raise the money to feed them and so forth. At age 50 to 55 days, we remove them from our cage areas out into a tight barn. And that barn, it just precludes the owls from leaving when they want to. After about 2 weeks in the barn, they'll be flying in the limited sense, and age 90 days, we should start looking to release the birds. We also put live mice into a tank and allow them to realize what it is they're to hunt for once you open the doors.
I usually try to keep 20 in the pool, or whatever you call it. They come down to eat them. In the morning I count them and they aren't all there. Well, I figured I wanted to have an owl nest, and I would like to have some owls in my barn, so I got 3 instead of 2.
In the case of the barn owl, the property owners are pivotal because there is not enough nesting territory for the barn owls left anymore, and that's caused by change in barn construction, fewer farms, elimination of den trees in the woods, and we have to have those nesting sites reestablished. We have primarily men who enjoy working in wood shops that build boxes. We've actually had to slow them down because our budget is such that we have to just sit back and wait. We have built approximately 450 nest boxes. And then we have the installers. There we restrict the installers to people who are comfortable that can scale ladders well, no kids go up them and so forth. But the amount of dedication is remarkable.
That's right. Yeah, these guys are scary looking. These are nocturnal. Do you know what that is?
We have the presenters as well who go out to civic groups, speak to the schools, and also go and sit in malls.
And the way their wings are, they're silent. They're totally silent. The poor little mouse doesn't have a chance. That's why they're such good. That's why people that have barns like them. Yeah, they really do like them a lot.
We have spoken to approximately 3,000 students since the 1st of January, trying to get them involved, and it's working very well. Over 100 aquariums are out there with the schools raising them, and property owners, just individuals, are taking them home as well, so we're very pleased with that.
I'm a Cub Scout den leader, and the opportunity came about for me to raise something in an aquarium for the kids to observe how animals were raised. And whenever this come about with the barn owls, I decided to take on the project. And the Moraine Preservation Fund supplied me with 5 mice, an aquarium, bedding, and food. And this is where we're at. We raise mice.
The reason that I believe a majority of the volunteers are involved is that this gives you a very unique opportunity to affect all aspects of environmental work. It's not just a species reintroduction program, but it's a pollution reduction program to eliminate rodenticides, a habitat improvement program for nest box installation, so you attract the birders. It is a habitat improvement program with fence row habitat for all types of wildlife. And it gives you a sense that there is really something you can do to undo the environmental damage we as a species do. So we're very pleased with the enthusiasm of the people. We think that's the basis of why they come and stay so long and put in so many hours. We expected the program initially to take 10 years because the goal to do the project well, as set by the scientists, was approximately 1,000 owls into western Pennsylvania. With any luck at all, because of the progress we're making, we may hit that goal within 6 years.
A copy of the program you've just seen can be purchased through Penn State Media Sales at mediasales.psu.edu or by calling 800-770-2111.